Recently I got the itch to play an immersive sim, and while I've played a bunch of arcane stuff, even Dark Messiah, which is one of my all-time favorites, I never really got around to playing the classics. I am really interested in learning about game design. I have been since I was a kid. Learning about the choices made during development and their effects on the future of the industry has always been fascinating to me, which I think is why when I finally decided on what to play, I decided to start at the very beginning. Wait, what's that doing on screen? No, I was talking about... Okay, look, I don't have time to talk about why System Shock is so damn good. Maybe I could do an entire video on it in the future, but I struggle to think of what I could say about it that hasn't been said in the 30 years since it released. Depending on who you asked, it is either the first immersive sim or the grandfather of all immersive sims. And after my playthroughs of both the Enhanced Edition and the remake, I think it is one of my favorite games of all time. The immersive sim genre has one of my favorite game design philosophies hands down. The way I see it, immersive sims focus on delivering complete player agency, this concept of a virtual world built on systems and rules that's completely at your mercy, at least insofar as the world is willing to give you enough proverbial rope. In fact, one of my favorite franchises, Stalker, is an amazing example of this. The game gives you just enough freedom that if you choose to step over the boundaries the game sets, it doesn't stop you with invisible walls or fail states, but instead with swift retaliation in the form of a wall of guns and grenades, far superior in both quality and number to your own. But if you're good enough, or stubborn enough, it will concede, and to you, the victor, go the spoils. It's this concept of agency, the fact that a player's creativity is allowed to be fostered and rewarded inside of the game, that makes these games so awesome to me. Borrowing an idea from one of my favorite creators, Warlocracy, who once made the claim that RPGs are high art, I believe that immersive sims, because they use the medium of video games as interactive art to the greatest extent possible, are also one of the highest forms of art in the medium we can get. Not to mention that immersive sim and RPG game design go hand in hand in a post-System Shock 2 world. Anyway, this video isn't about immersive sims, but it's instead about something that some might consider ubiquitous in the genre. This topic has been on my mind for years, but I've only recently managed to figure out a conclusion, spurred on by my recent System Shock obsession. So this video is mostly for me, but feel free to stick along for the ride. Put simply, hacking is the act of gaining access to electronic devices without authorization from the owner. In the United States, it is super illegal and can get you hit with a felony in some extreme cases. But hacking in real life is significantly less thrilling than its usual depiction in media. But it's also not fucking this. In Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, science is a skill that you can dump points into that gives you an advantage towards dialogue options involving science, as well as, go figure, allows you to access electronics like computer terminals or robots. Now, since Fallout is based on the generic universal role-playing system, a system I'm actually quite fond of, it makes sense that hacking would be a roll of the dice, based on your character's stats, and this approach is fine. It's actually likely the only way to do this when you're making an RPG based on a tabletop rule system. Bethesda has been making RPGs since 1994. Wow, coincidentally also the year that System Shock came out. Actually, Bethesda's first RPG game is Elder Scrolls Arena, a franchise I'm sure nobody has ever heard of. At least I think it's their first RPG. Wayne Gretzky hockey could have some crazy character build diversity. Fun fact actually, Elder Scrolls Arena took some pretty major inspiration from the predecessor to System Shock, the Ultima Underworld games, which is pretty apparent at a glance. Bethesda's first iteration of a lockpicking minigame was, I believe, with the release of Oblivion, but it would be their next release that would perfect it in my opinion. Fallout 3 was, well, it was mediocre at best. With Bethesda acquiring the Fallout IP in 2004, they had to figure out how to adapt their game design around a post-apocalyptic setting. The most relevant to the topic at hand being their gamified lockpicking system. And I can only imagine that this system is why they eventually decided to come up with something similar for hacking. Now, depending on who you ask, this was either the worst thing ever, or if you ask me, it was a great idea done poorly. I really like feeling like I'm in control of the outcomes of my actions. So having more control over how I hack into a device is really cool in my opinion. Unfortunately, Fallout 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76's hacking minigames are tedious at best. although I can't help but like it on some level. The hacking minigame requires not only skill investment, but persistence as well. Here's how it works. Selecting matching brackets will either remove a dud or restore your guesses. It'll tell you which letters are correct with each guess, but you can pretty easily brute force your way through this minigame. And that's about it. In terms of depth, this is, I feel, what makes it so annoying to people. The fact that it's a roadblock that is tedious to get past and not even truly challenging or deep in any meaningful way. Now, why am I bringing up Fallout, a franchise that's lacked player agency in all but exploration and how to best blow up people since 2008, with the exception of New Vegas? Well, it's because this is the perfect example of the state of hacking minigames in gaming, even among games that otherwise have incredible player-driven gameplay. Keep this in mind as we move forward. In Watch Dogs, you play as Aiden Pierce, a vigilante with backdoor access into the Central Operating System, or CTOS for short, that basically runs Chicago, controlling its stoplights, security cameras, fucking transformers. Everything seems to be connected via this network, even including a profiling system which collects hordes of data on every individual civilian it can get its metaphorical eyes on. Mechanically, the hacking and its effects are both pretty basic, representative of the fact that the network is barely a 1.0 version, and exploits for the citywide network are also pretty basic, as well as being clearly a game designed for consoles of the PS3 era. But what I like most about this game is the protagonist, Aiden Pierce. He uses social engineering to get access to networks and information he couldn't otherwise. His willing usage of violence, his exploitation of people just as much as code, is something present in this game more than any other when it comes to portrayals of hacking. I struggle to think of any other game that does it as well as this game, which honestly isn't a high bar, since even though I praise it, it's a pretty small part of the game as a whole. In Prey 2017, you can often hack doors and terminals in what is honestly one of the worst and most frustrating hacking minigames I've ever experienced. This stupid little circle controls like hot ass, and this minigame adds nothing. At least Fallout has the decency to keep you immersed. The minigame is diegetic, it's consistent with the art style of the terminal itself. But this is so fucking out of place, and every time this stupid fuck hits a wall, I want to scream my lungs out. In System Shock, you play as a cyber criminal who hacks into Tri-Optimum, a mega corporation that builds military hardware, robots, and also seems to actively dabble in eugenics. Tri-Op Security apprehends you and brings you to the office of Edward Diego on Citadel Station, who offers you a military implant as well as the procedure to install it in return for your services. The unshackling of the station's AI, Shodan. You wake up 6 months later to Chaos, the seemingly sole survivor kept alive in stasis. As a hacker, someone who knows computer systems inside and out, someone who spends their time looking at vulnerable code and scanning computer screens late into the night. Naturally, using your life skills, proceed to shoot, blow up, and beat your way through Citadel Station. Naturally. System Shock's hacking has three aspects, sort of. Circuit puzzles and wire puzzles both allow you to gain access to doors that would either stay locked or require other roundabout methods of access. These puzzles will also activate stuff like light bridges and elevators. These two puzzles are less hacking and more like advanced lockpicking. Now, unless I'm stupid, this is really just a game about trial and error. Or at least that's how it seems to be intended. The aptly named Icebreaker PDF included with the Enhanced Edition actually shows you the solution to both types of puzzles, which is nice because I hate solving them. These puzzles are vastly improved in the 2023 remake, actually being randomized to some extent, requiring you to actually solve them instead of just know the solution beforehand. But honestly, the real hacking comes in the form of cyberspace. This is by far the dumbest, most 80s hackerman shit I have ever seen, and I kinda love it. Cyberspace is full of defenses like obstacles, mines, and enemies, and you have to navigate these wireframe spaces in order to unlock doors for progression, and can often open paths to completely optional goodies. I definitely prefer cyberspace in the remake, however, since it's, well, first of all, it controls so much better than the original game, and on top of that, it's way more combat-oriented, which feels a bit more on brand for the way hacking is depicted in these games, with the security being personified as little guys who shoot at you, and especially with how aggressive the hacker plays during combat. The remake's faster-paced, far more intense cyberspace feels way more on brand for the hacker's character, though, to be honest, the remake hackers look way more up to the task of running and gunning through Citadel Station than this fucking loser. System Shock's sequel, the aptly named System Shock 2, has hacking that I can only describe as Skyrim hacking. Okay, so get this. It's based on character stats, similar to Fallout, for example, but it also uses a connect the dots minigame to add a bit more flair to it. The only problem is your input basically doesn't matter. Your hacking skill combined with your cyber stat and hacking software is what determines the percentage chance of a successful hack. I heard someone describe it as a scratch-off lottery ticket once, and it's such a perfect descriptor for this utterly fucking terrible system. It's actually reused for repair minigames too. And honestly, if this is what a hacking minigame looked like to the people working on immersive sims, then I am genuinely happy that they decided to go all in with the character-driven gameplay with Deus Ex, since ultimately if you're gonna half-ass a system, you might as well put that effort towards making the other aspects of your game better. Now, Cyberpunk might force you to solve a crossword puzzle, and Arkham will make you solve a Wordle. In Dishonored, you just stick a rewire tool into a fuse box and it just works. In Deathloop, you just press and hold middle mouse button. Just like in Watch Dogs. Holy shit. My point is that while all of these systems are usually fine for the games they exist in, video games seem to have a terrible track record with hacking. To be fair though, most hacking depictions in media are pretty terrible, but it also seems at this point that people simply don't want to innovate. Hacking has been by and large getting worse or at least more simplistic. For example, Bethesda has effectively created a homunculus of game design by combining lockpicking and hacking into one system. And one of the most recent sims that comes to mind that has hacking contains one of the worst systems I think ever.
Hi. This is strange. Stranger than I expected. Guess I'm supposed to write this in past tense, though I hardly feel like admitting it's over. My name is Bit, and if you're reading this, I'm already dead.
Hacknet is an operating system inside of a virtual machine inside of a game. In-universe, it's designed as one of the most dangerous pieces of hacking software ever. When booted up for the first time, the tutorial program claims that the user is in danger and must urgently learn how to use Hacknet. It's some standard stuff that does an effective job of teaching you how to use commands and programs to crack device security and cover your tracks. The game in its entirety is really well paced to teach you how all its mechanics work, and you'll rarely get stuck if you pay attention. Fun fact, actually, since the game simulates a Unix-inspired operating system, the tutorial is actually a program that has to be killed to finish it. This means that if you already know how to find the tutorial process ID, you can now skip the tutorial and get into the main game faster. It's actually something I do on every new playthrough. The game sees you quickly getting involved in up to 3 separate hacker circles, and progressing through them is as simple as doing missions and building reputation until you get invited to the next one. The missions get more difficult as time goes on, security gets stricter, eventually being completely uncrackable and forcing you to get creative in how you access systems. Scanning for other devices becomes less reliable. You have to actively keep your eyes out to connect manually to IP addresses. Sometimes you just straight up won't have the tools to open enough ports. You have to look for passwords on other devices, and the traces run on you give you less time, some as little as 10 seconds, putting you on a crunch to find your information. Wipe all trace of your intrusion and get out. Get out! Disconnect before— This is probably a good time to bring up the soundtrack, which I've been using throughout the entire Hacknet section. This OST is incredible. It really puts you in the mood for being an awesome hacker. In fact, it's so good that it's quickly become my new standard for hacker music. As far as I can tell, the only piece of licensed music is used at the very end, with Roller Mobster by Carpenter Brute, and its usage in the finale set piece never fails to get my blood pumping. Hacknet's main expansion adds its own soundtrack that honestly blows most of the main game's music out of the water, although that is just my opinion. Speaking of Labyrinths, it doesn't just add new music, but also contains a full-blown story expansion that will blow you out of the water with the amount of content it brings to the table, including several new programs that are mostly side grades to the main game's set of tools. If you do end up grabbing the DLC, which I highly recommend, you can access it after you gain membership to one of the 3 main hacking organizations. I'd recommend doing it in the mid to late game, specifically when you join CSEC, as it demands a bit more experience. It also just simply hits harder once you've experienced most of the main game. By playing the DLC, you also get unique tools that are either direct upgrades like FTP Sprint, or side grades like Signal Scramble, which slows down a trace exponentially as it spools up. SSL Trojan and Torrent Stream Injector I don't think actually have a use outside of Labyrinth, but I could be wrong. Memory Forensics and its companion Memory Dump, on the other hand, actually can uncover a bunch of new text and actually have uses in the main story in comparison to some tools, which is honestly just really fucking sick that I get rewarded with more info on certain devices for using the tools from Labyrinths. The gameplay loop in this game is genuinely so amazing. The level of depth and mastery this game has when it comes to blitzing through command lines is so satisfying I struggle to describe it. Actually, that's not true. If I had to compare it to something, it would be like learning how to parry an ultra kill for the first time. The gameplay truly gives you that feeling of being a hacker, presented not necessarily with realism, but with immersion, intentionally backed by just enough real-world hacking inspiration while still actually being fun to play. I think one of the things that ties this together is the fact that it simulates a command line and you have to actually sit down and type things in. It's one of my favorite things in gaming, and I'm glad that there are a few games that are aiming to force you to interact with terminals via your own keyboard. Specifically games like GTFO or the upcoming extraction shooter Beautiful Light, which doesn't just make you interact with terminals authentically, but actually lets you effectively hack into nearby devices using real-world Linux knowledge. Hacknet also takes its immersion further. Two specific examples come to mind. Labyrinths does pull some meta bullshit after a counter hack, actually forcing you to do some real-world terminal work on your actual computer, but there's an even better example in the main game that showcases my point. When you do enough work for Entropy, the first organization you get in deep with, you get an email about an aggressive hacker who's been stealing data from a major corporation. The email reads as follows.
You've proved yourself very capable in a very small amount of time. I'm impressed. There's something that's been bothering me for a while that I'd like you to help with. A relatively new but talented hacker by the handle Nakes has been a bit over-aggressive. He claims to have recently stolen a great deal of internal data from Microsoft Incorporated. Entropy is actively trying to improve the view of the hacker community in the eyes of the public. Just because our methods are illegitimate does not mean our intentions are to harm. Nakes is doing a lot to damage this effort. I would like you to delete what he stole.
Nakes' proxy node has some pretty bare-bones security. It's easy to get in and out, but it's what comes after that's really important.
Seriously? You think you can just fuck with my stuff and leave without consequence? Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't find you? You're a pathetic script kiddie. You couldn't hack a fucking honeypot without your precious buttons and scroll bars. Say goodbye to your X server, idiot.
Fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you too, buddy.
Nakes counter-hacks you, deleting your system files, running a fork bomb, and then rebooting your device. Without the xserver.sys file, the device boots up into a command terminal mode, and from here you have to find a working system file. It's also this section, though short, that truly showcases how deep this game really is, but to show you, I have to turn the floor over to recording game reel. Okay, so this hack is the perfect example for how Hacknet fully simulates, basically everything. So, effectively what's happened is that we've lost our xserver.sys file, and we are now going to be forced to find a new one. So, effectively all the xserver.sys file does is display the UI elements, right? So there are two options here, right? For how to go along with this. So obviously we need to get an X server. So if we do ls and we change directory to sys and ls, you'll notice that we're missing the xserver.sys file. There's two ways to do this to get one back. Obviously one of these is just scanning, and if you remember from the tutorial, there is a computer terminal connected directly to the current terminal that we're working from. So, one option is just to connect to Valence Interactive, that's the randomly generated terminal name that it gave me this time, and we can go in and copy that over. There is also a far more interesting way to do this, however, which is if we go to log, change directory log list. Here we go. File deleted by. So what we can do is we can connect to his IP 21.80. So we're now reconnected to the same node that we just ended up sabotaging, right? So now we're just gonna list, okay, right, so we can't. So we're gonna probe, and we're going to SSH crack on 22, and then we're going to port hack once that's done. So now what we're doing is we're running our hacking scripts, but we don't have a UI, so it's just kind of really basic. Anyways, but we're gonna hack in, we're gonna get the admin access and everything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to list, we're going to change directory to system, and then we're going to list, and we are going to copy, scp x-server.sys. It's transferred. Now we can reboot. Oh, I rebooted the other system. Fuck, I'm stupid. Okay, it disconnected me when I rebooted the system. Okay, anyways. I rebooted Nakes' device, not my own. That's pretty funny, actually. So, anyways, now that we have rebooted, we now have a brand new UI theme. Normally, I would be, normally I would say, oh yeah, it's cool that it does this. So here's the thing, right? I'm gonna go here, and we're gonna go find... Fuck it, let's do the Viper Battle Station, right? Okay, so I'm gonna take this, the Viper Battle Station, right? And I'm going to go back to my device. I'm gonna keep that IP in mind. I have it screenshotted on my second monitor. We're gonna keep that IP address in mind. We are going to view my file system, go to sys, and then we're going to mvx-server.sys, and we are going to rename it to let's do xsys. There we go. Okay, so that's been renamed. We're going to reboot. So now that I no longer have an xserver.sys, right? It's going to do the same thing that happened when Nakes hacked me, and it is going to basically be like, hey, there's no server file. So then it's going to load back up into terminal mode. So the really interesting thing about Hacknet is that from terminal mode, you can do just about everything that you can with a UI, which is very true to, how most computers operate. You can just straight up use Linux just from a terminal, It's booted up, right? So I'm going to just do connect to 246.103.252.174, right? Boom, connected to Viper Battle Station. And if I go and I list, I can see, there's this is a completely separate thing. Now, I don't actually know if I can access Gmail or anything from this, because I know that Gmail is primarily a UI based thing. So this is a testament to the level of immersion that Hacknet holds itself to. It is so deeply it's so deeply faithfully tries to simulate the computer aspect of this game, the simulation of you are a hacker working with computers and stuff and accessing them and stuff, that effectively the entire UI layer is capable of being stripped away and the game still works to some extent, it is fully simulating every aspect of this, and that is just so damn cool to me. Aside from the two scripted attacks, the game can also dynamically retaliate, but after digging into how the game works, it seems like the game will only perform a counter hack against you if you leave log files on a device that has flags for performing counter hacks. So, never forget to clean up after yourselves, kids. Okay, we've hit the point where I can no longer remain spoiler-free, so I'm going to seriously spoil stuff for late-game Hacknet here because I really need to talk about this game's plot and how incredibly well written it is. If you don't want spoilers, skip to the timestamp on screen. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hacknet is a game that presents itself as a puzzle game. The game is a sequence of happy-go-lucky, hacking-themed challenges and puzzles that don't seem to actually affect the overarching plot, which is what makes it so much more jarring when one of the missions for CSEC asks you to euthanize someone. The contract tells you that the patient has been denied the option themselves, and so you are asked to stop their heart via a pacemaker. To me, it was mostly just business as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling of how serious this was. Even after I get admin logs and properly acquire the unfinished firmware that will completely brick the patient's pacemaker, having to sit there and type in the commands that will end a life is just so heavy for a game about being an awesome hacker, man. This is one of my favorite missions in the entire game. It's incredibly challenging with some serious digging that needs to be done on the player's part to get IP addresses and logins for the pacemaker. I guess it also helps that the mission has a grave nature to it. Once the job is done and I sit watching the heart rate monitor go haywire, Once the job is done and I sit watching the heart monitor go haywire, I can't help but feel disturbed that somewhere someone is going into cardiac arrest because of my actions. Well, obviously not, it's just a video game, but somehow the level of immersion this game truly dedicates itself to makes this an insanely effective emotional set piece. Shortly after the previously mentioned job is offered, you get contacted by someone who claims to have known Bitwise named V, and they ask you to do some digging. This is where you can find out that Bitwise was somehow involved with Entech, a company that has some new, seemingly uncrackable security. Eventually, your digging will lead you to find out that Bit had a bunch of freedom in the company and was making contributions to something called the Hacknet project. It's here where things start to fall into place. Bitwise compiled the first ever copy of Hacknet and packaged it with his magnum opus, PortHack, something he was making on the side while working for Entech. The tools that we have been using so thoughtlessly since the beginning are those developed by Bitwise himself. We're a script kiddie of the highest magnitude, but one in the most important positions possible. During the investigation into Entech, you discover that the company is pretty internally consistent in the desire to create uncrackable security while simultaneously killing everything else on the market by releasing Hacknet, a program that literally makes any security obsolete. Bitwise pretty quickly realized that this would lead to the monopolization of privacy and security, and it's clear that Bit was afraid of having some hand in creating a cyberpunk dystopia. You can find an email chain between the CEO of Entech and some shady dark web guy, and you find out that Bitwise, who was maybe just out of high school judging by the English assignment he has backed up in several locations throughout the game, was assassinated after his attempts to slow the Hacknet project. This to me is obvious. The game opens up telling you that Bitwise is dead, and it's referenced in Bit's pre-written messages that they are written within the context that he is dead. But that doesn't make it any less heartbreaking to read the confirmation that the person who set us on this path, who has clearly had a positive influence on the other people in these groups, was killed by an incompetent CEO who was pissed that Bit finally realized that his work was against his morals. Once the discovery period climaxes, V, the hacker who's been working side by side with you to uncover the sins of this company, tells you to boot up a sequencer program that can be found on the CSEC drop server as early as your induction. The Entech backup servers are stored offline to prevent tampering, but come online at specific times to stay up to date. The sequencer program is one of V's own design, made specifically for hacking jobs that required several hackers to be perfectly in sync. When ran, the sequencer will signal V to force the backup servers online to allow you to break in. As you break in, you have to crack every single level of security in place before scanning for any Hacknet-related files, deleting them, and getting out in one of the most heart-thumping races against the clock yet. Everything in the game, every computer you've busted into, every contract you've taken on, even the Labyrinth's missions, every tool you've acquired is brought into this fucking amazing finale backed by Roller Mobster by Carpenter Brute, of which I cannot play during this section because licensing music is really expensive and I want to keep the ad revenue for this video. And when you type DC for the final time and send that email telling V that it's over, they respond with an email so beautifully written that it is immensely effective as a portrayal of a person who has to keep on living after they hit send.
And so it ends. As revenge is shallow to me, just lashing out at what he was, and all too late to help him at all. But this felt right. I guess I should be more used to it. No one will notice, huh? Not except the ones who will be in a rage over the loss. No one's going to be thanking us, no matter how much damage it might have caused otherwise. Such is the way of things, I guess.
And after that, Bit's final message, the one he wrote first, tells you that the only copy of Hacknet left, if things went right, is the one you're running right now. And he leads you to the heart of Port Hack, his magnum opus, the tool that let you get this far. And he tells you to destroy it. And so, you do. Hacknet's ability to tell its story entirely through text is unique to its presentation. Hacknet does effectively what the original System Shock did in terms of telling its story, but opposite. Where System Shock pioneered voice logs, Hacknet only has a single voice performance, and it is at the very end of the game. Everything is told to you via emails or text files. You have to read and engage with the story as it's written, and the writing is amazing. Every character feels like a person, helped by the fact that their computers feel personalized. They have files, notes, saved IRC chats that they thought were funny. This all helps to make this feel less like a game and immerse you in the internet you are simulating on your PC. Kind of like an immersive sim. Hacknet may not be realistic, but it's a good example, I think, of a direction to take for hacking in games. I believe that hacking should not be something to simply spec into out of convenience, as I so often do in games, especially when it's accompanied with a half-assed minigame, but instead its own playstyle. I brought something similar up in a video a few years ago where I effectively reinvented the immersive sim genre. The energy was misdirected there, but there's still some solid ideas presented, I think. I understand that no matter what, lockpicking and hacking are always going to break the pace for some folks, regardless of how much depth these systems try to have. So instead, I believe that players should have alternatives to hacking and lockpicking. Players who want to hack can upgrade their hacking toolkit to gain access to higher levels of security, and much like Hacknet, through their own creativity, can even access systems elsewhere, or gain notes and audio logs remotely by accessing data storage servers by cracking an unsecured work device. A hacker player could locate vulnerabilities in a keypad and use that to open other doors remotely by hacking into an area's keypad authentication server. This would make hacking not just fun, but its own playstyle that would require investigation and puzzle solving beyond just random chance, or click and hold, or sit and wait. I actually created an interactive demonstration of this concept in Hacknet itself, so I'll have to turn this over to Live Game Reel once again. Okay, if I sound like shit, it's because I'm really sick right now. While I'm finishing up this video, I had to re-record this section because it wasn't concise enough. Anyways, so here I've made a example extension for my, sort of conceptual, idea of what hacking would look like in another game, for example, right? So what we have right here is we have my, my hacking suite. This is, my device that I'm going to use to hack into everything else. So what we have right here is M. Stevenson's workstation. I don't remember the password to this because I made this like a month ago, but the original idea was effectively, you find a password taped to the monitor and you're able to just log in. But I'm just going to hack in here because I don't remember that password. What we're going to do now is we're going to scan for other devices on the network, and we're going to see that there's an internal affairs work tablet attached to it. Now inside here, we're going to need to crack this SSH. We're going to open the ports and, backdoor into this tablet. And inside of this tablet, I've actually added a bunch of text files and stuff. But that's not really important. We're going to scan for more devices while connected to this tablet, and we're going to find R. Williams' laptop. We're going to probe this system. There's a firewall here. I'm pretty sure I remember the solution to this one because this one is actually just set. Yep. So we've now backdoored into this. This is the IT guy's work device, right? Or not his work device. This is his tablet, his laptop that is just completely. Anyways, this is his personal laptop, right? And so on his personal laptop, we're going to find that inside of his bin, he has just a bunch of these, hacking tools. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy those to our hacking suite in order to upgrade our hacking suite. I'm also going to remove all of these files just so I don't get retaliated against, because I believe that is a feature. So now that we have our hacking suite upgraded, we can tackle the Urizon IT Level 2 authentication server. Now we have access to the Urizon IT Level 2 authentication server, and we can view the files, right? So now we have an elevator code that is being stored on this server. We also have, if we scan, we can see that it's connected to the Level 2 Armory keypad. The only unfortunate thing is that this keypad is connected to a completely different, it's like whitelist server, so our device can't access this right now. But ideally, now that we have the level 2 authentication server, now that we're admined into this, we could maybe go and unlock some other doors or, whatever on this level, right? So this is my interactive demonstration, right? This sort of shows how this would work on a on a surface level. It's not anywhere near balanced or fleshed out. This was something I threw together in like a day because fucking learning how to build a extension for Hacknet was kind of rough. But so yeah, just fucking this is a pretty good example of the concept that I imagine for hacking in games moving forward. Now, for players who don't want to hack or lockpick, it becomes far simpler. Let players pry open locked doors or crates, let them blow stuff up to access goodies or locked areas, maybe at the risk of alerting enemies and triggering alarms, making subterfuge satisfying to the players who want that. And hell, maybe even give these overt playstyle players access to quick hack tools, USBs that auto-hack keypads, but are one-time use and quite rare. There's so much potential with the concept of hacking that I'm quite surprised that games have such a shallow interpretation of it. I obviously understand that what I'm asking for would be an insane undertaking, but Hacknet's level of depth has proven to me that hacking could always be more interesting than the simple, tedious, pace-breaking minigames that are so goddamn common. To conclude this insane video I made almost on a whim, I just want to say that hacking as a concept has immense potential as a system, inside an immersive sim. The internet itself is a series of connected systems. On a smaller scale, a company-wide network is also just a system made of systems. The joke of, oh, an MSim must have hacking might be funny, but hacking is literally the perfect fit for a genre about building systems that interact, because that's literally how computers work. So please, stop half-assing hacking, make it fun, make it engaging, give the gameplay system of hacking the effort it deserves. Thanks for watching, bye.